So what are the features of great design? Function is probably the first one. Does it do something that actually enhances human need? Does it facilitate something that is actually a human need? Form. Form is the flash, it's the pretty stuff. It's probably the most memorable component of design. Without it, you're really not complete in a good design. Elegance. Elegance refers to the fact when you look at something that's well designed, you look back over your shoulder and you say, well, of course it had to be like that. It's perfect. It's exactly the way it was supposed to be. But you only get that really in retrospect. You can't possibly imagine that in the future. But when it achieves elegance, now you've got something that's truly remarkable. Efficiency. Efficiency makes what you already do easier or makes what you do right now more powerful than it was before. And then finally, the big one, simplicity. It's probably the hardest to achieve in the area of design. Trying to come up with simple, creative executions. They only look simple on the tail end. It's really hard to achieve that simplicity up front. So let's talk about where these creative endeavors are undertaken. You've got, in the upper left, you've got a design studio. And in the lower right, you've got an artist studio. In the upper left, isn't that this space isn't creative. There's clearly creative access to books and magazines and graphic components. It's very well lit. It's aesthetically pleasing. You see the person actually working in the design studio. They're on the right-hand side facing the windows because you need to be able to look out. The person below doesn't have the same kind of an equipment, but they're clearly inspired to create. And in fact, this is something that a colleague pointed out. He said, up in the design studio, they execute based on the tasks they're given. The person in the artist studio, which is their car, drove to the place where they wanted to be inspired, and then they painted. And she's literally painting the scene that's right outside her window. It's very rare to see designers designing for design's sake, whereas you often see artists creating art for the sake of art, because they're inspired to do that. It's a different kind of an approach. Now, both of them really leverage creativity, and that's what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the way that creativity is applied there. Creativity drives both in the form of consumer experiences that are uniquely compelling. This parallels all the talks that I've had around the categories of innovation. You've got experience, you've got products, you've got services, and there's a few other sort of outlying categories. But compelling consumer experience, groundbreaking new products that revolutionize your category, or services that are so revolutionary that they inspire instantaneous loyalty between a consumer and a brand or a product or an experience. And I am a strong testament to that brand loyalty. I love the Apple products, right? But those kinds of services, the Apple Care program, what they've done in the form of iTunes or the delivery of service through their Apple products, they've actually synthesized several of these, and they've achieved a remarkable standard. So where do the ideas come from? You're looking at trying to synthesize differences, taking things that are fundamentally different and pushing them together. It provides a new flavor. It provides something that would not have existed before. Right? You're actually intentionally taking two different things and you're combining them. We talked at our last workshop about breaking things down into their constituent pieces, deconstructing stuff, and then picking commonality and trying to shove the pieces back together again. What we're talking about here is literally taking the most disparate pieces of anything and slamming them together to try to make them. And in fact, the strongest ones are the ones that are most highly juxtaposed. And we're entering into philosophy here, but we're talking about slamming atomic pieces together. The further away they are, the more subatomic forces that are repelling them. When you put them together, you wind up having some really, really powerful stuff. And we're talking about unlikely juxtapositions. This opens up the next idea of looking outside. Has everyone here heard of open innovation? Just the practice of open innovation? What that refers to is basically not eating your own cooking all the time. Realizing that probably you don't have the best ideas every time, that ideas can come from the outside, that collaboration is actually going to give you a better perspective on what the next big thing might look like. So you always have to keep an awareness on the outside. And then finally, knowing that discipline is not your friend. Doing the things the same old way is probably not going to elicit the kind of results that ultimately you'd like to see. That discipline, that tradition is tired and stale. Although it might be successful, it's probably not going to be successful forever. And you've got to decide what you're going to do with that. So, What are some of the axioms of creative design? Incrementalism is the enemy. Very much like looking at tradition. I'm going to show you a couple of images here. The sailing ship is so much better than rowing. All we have to do is just add more sails. It'd be awesome. Isn't the boat great? Well, that discounts the opportunity to put a boat into the water with an engine, or even better, put hydrofoils underneath that engine and actually push that boat through the water. Which one is going to wind up being better? This person who designed this particular item wasn't thinking about revolutionizing the transportation. They were simply incrementally adding to it. And while incrementalism, in that overall grid where I said it's down here towards the origin or maybe up the y-axis, it's not that radical innovation that's going to wind up delivering you the hydrofoil. Common sense is common, and that's not a bad thing. I don't know, 100 years ago, 110 years ago, they came up with a stapler, which I really love the sort of archaic design there. You wind up pushing a piece of metal through a stack of paper. It needs to have a mouth that you put the paper into. It needs to have a thing that you push down to be able to bend the wire, and now you've got a staple. All these designs came out of it, and they all more or less have the same sort of structure. But in 2008 and 2010, a couple other staplers came to the space. This was a design up on top. This is a design that came out of a Russian design school. It was an award-winning design using titanium, precious metals. You've got an actual torque adjustment right there in the upper portion of the stapler. It's beautiful. The function is incredibly smooth. It's a hydraulic lift that winds up going on. It's an $80 stapler. It's a gorgeous stapler. You wind up looking at the one on the bottom. This is a 2008 design, I think, from Red Dot, a Scandinavian group that actually does usability and ergonomics. So it's a really comfortable stapler, reacts well to the human hand. But all of them have the same sort of characteristic, because common sense says this is what you have to have first. You're not going to build a stapler the size of a car just because you can, because that doesn't make any sense. No one's going to use that as a stapler. Use common sense in the same context. So when you wind up seeing stuff that really is common, there's a common theme. This is the Socratic chair, the Platonic chair, where you wind up seeing the shadows in the wall and it representative of the overall reality. This is exactly the same sort of thing. Your best vision is peripheral vision. People often talk about leadership having the appropriate vision to steer a company towards the new horizon, try to achieve great things. But keep in mind that it's the stuff that you wind up seeing on the peripheral vision that winds up distracting you from your single-minded purpose. And there's a reason that you were distracted. It was sparkly, it was interesting. Look at it. It might give you justification for the entire course that you're on. It might wind up giving you an entirely different compass point to steer to that you didn't really realize was there before. If you're willing to be distracted, you'll actually find stuff that you never would have considered previously. If you stay with blinders on, you're never going to observe what the opportunities really are. Finally, simplicity is complex. I think everybody kind of understands this, but if you've ever been to a Zen garden, you can go and you can see a beautiful environment. It's relaxing, it's charming. It required an enormous amount of work and constant maintenance to achieve that level of simplicity. It feels like it's a relaxing, natural place to be, and it is, but it's also meticulously groomed and maintained. So that simplicity that it implies, the calmness that you have when you wind up entering that space, is very, very hard to achieve. And you can apply that same kind of philosophy around achieving simplicity to any other project that you've got, whether it's your business model, your product, or your service. So you have to commit to creativity. It's not going to happen by itself. The way that you achieve innovation using this kind of creative methodology is not going to happen simply because you want it to. You have to commit to it. You're probably not going to be successful at it every single time. That needs to be a reality that you embrace. Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of all the shots that you never take. Take the shot. Go for it. And because it's very exciting. Taking that shot, taking that first step is just absolutely thrilling. In fact, there's a real denouement after you wind up falling out of the airplane about 2,000 meters and you're actually falling towards the earth. Finally, the chute opens. That first step is, that's the really big one. So if you haven't taken it yet, I encourage you to try it out. It's very exciting. It's important to know that as you take these first steps and as I inspire you to try to be creative in your innovation, you understand that practice is very important. And the old axiom is that practice makes perfect. And that's not 100% true. Perfect practice makes perfect. Christina Aguilera is a great performer, and I don't mean to slam her, but during the Super Bowl, I'm willing to bet that she didn't practice the national anthem because she probably thought she knew it. She's a heck of a performer. She winds up going out every weekend or several times a week when she's on tour and performs to hundreds of thousands of people across the world, millions of people. But she wasn't ready for that because I don't really think that she practiced on it. She didn't think about it really hard. The performer on the right-hand side practices 16 hours a day, 364 days a year, and when she hits the stage, it's perfect every time. Now, I don't want to intimidate you into saying, hey, let's not do this unless I can actually make it perfect. It's a road, right? It's a journey. You need to try to make sure you achieve that, but focus on trying to make it perfect. Focus on trying to enhance your ability. Don't just go through the motions. You have to actually exercise this to get somewhere, and it isn't that your practice must be perfect. You must strive to make your practice perfect, ultimately, if you want to achieve perfection.